I had everything ready for today on Saturday, ready to go. I knew my slides, I knew my subject, and the reality is I sort of woke up on Sunday morning and realized that CELAG, the CELAG conference and Ahmed and you guys deserved something better. The slides I had were all very much kind of the standard conversations we've all had at CELAG conferences around, why this is such an exciting space. But Ahmed asked me to talk about something different. He asked me to talk about the role of corporates and partnerships and building the future of food. So we can't just focus on, why CELAG is such a kind of cool, interesting, innovative space and just continue to have the same discussions every time we go to new conferences and have the same, people around the table. You guys deserved better. So hopefully this is better. The reality is it's a lot of ideas that I've been thinking through for quite some time, and I started to put some structure to them this weekend. This is the first time I've ever discussed anything like this. So no script and ideas still bouncing around. So please, I ask for your forbearance. Quick thing, where does this all come from? A lot of these ideas come from the 7 plus, how many is it now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 companies that we have in our portfolio that are in the cell-based space. And we spend every Monday talking to these companies, as we're working with them, understanding the challenges of the business and how they're moving their businesses forward. So this has been hours and hours of time spent with cell-based companies and grappling with the challenges that they're sort of tackling as they build their businesses. This is not an academic exercise. This is a real business exercise from our point of view. And when I say our point of view, I'm going to give you a few minutes or maybe 60 seconds on who our means in this regard. So my name's Andrew Ive. I'm the founder and managing general partner for Big Idea Ventures. Our focus is solving the world's biggest challenges by backing the world's best entrepreneurs. And by entrepreneurs, we mean business starters and builders, we mean scientists, and we mean engineers. And ultimately, it's those folks and you folks who are going to get us out of the mess we've got ourselves into as a species and allow us to continue for hopefully quite some time on this planet. And without your solutions, we're not, we're going to have a really tough time. Now, I am definitely an optimist, and I do believe that you guys will get us there. You guys will solve these problems. And we see at Big Idea Ventures our role as helping to facilitate everything you want to do and the visions that you guys have. That means funding, but more than that, it means bringing you together with the right people in the value chain. It means, supporting you with the right mentors. It means working side by side with you to deliver on these solutions. I've personally made 60 plus investments in the food technology industry. I'm a board member at Tufts and originally Procter & Gamble trained, and please don't hold it against me, a Harvard Business School grad. So I could have today come and spoken about the usual arguments and the usual kind of, throwaway conversation points as far as CELAG is concerned. Yes, the animal protein industry is dramatically harming the climate and is causing, animal welfare challenges as well. And yes, CELAG and the ability to bring cell-based meat, seafood, and dairy to consumers means we don't need the same inputs in terms of land, water, antibiotics in the food system, and all and the climate warming, CO2 challenges, et cetera, et cetera. The reality is, you and I have all heard those things so many different times if we've attended even one conference in terms of CELAG. And again, you guys deserve better than that. One thing that strikes me is we talk about our generations and we label them. We've started doing this in the last, I don't know, decade or two. We talk about Gen X and Gen Y and millennials. But the reality is, as climate change has an increasing impact on us, unless we can really start to tackle that, the next generation is going to be generation food, because food and its shortages, whether it's because of a shock to the system like COVID on the supply chain, or just the ability of providing for the quantity of people we have, food is going to become the most dominant thought on our minds as a species over the next decade or more. And ultimately, I see you guys in the cell industry as the saviors of us in that sense. You guys will deliver the solutions we need. It's literally the most important industry we have. I should just kind of just pause there for a second. Everyone else can, you know, talk about the industry they're in as being important, but ultimately, the only way we can provide from a food security and food consumption perspective what we need to provide for our people, given the lack of arable land in key countries and, you know, many countries around the world, and how negative that kind of animal factory farming process is to you know, the climate, etc., and the amount of inputs required. You guys are the solution to that. You're literally in the most important industry. It's, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure there are other people writing about this, it's the fifth industrial revolution, i.e. biotechnology, microbiology, manufacturing, etc. You guys are the most, not only in the most important industry, but you're the next industrial revolution, post, you know, steam, electronics, etc. Biotechnology is the next industrial revolution, and we are just at the beginning of it as far as food is concerned. Now, what we need to recognize is that today we're not an industry. We're not there yet. What we are is point solutions. We are groups and little teams of technologists in different parts of the world playing with our science experiments. And that sounds condescending, and I apologize, but we're basically saying that the group of scientists who are working on the different solutions in the different kind of, whether it's you know, chicken or fish, or, you know, whatever it might be, from a food perspective, we are multiple disenfranchised, independent, tiny little teams working on individualized technologies. Now, yes, of course, we've got also companies who are working on the picks and shovels of the industry in terms of scaffold, in terms of cell lines, in terms of growth factor. But ultimately, we are the R&D function of an industry to come. We are not the industry yet. And what is that? And why is that the case? Well, because a cell-based food company needs to think beyond the technology. It needs to be thinking about scalable production. And it needs business people on the team who are focused on scalable production. I talked to an amazing cell-based company this morning that we're considering for our third cohort. I think we're going to make them an offer, but they are still 4 scientists who know very little about the scalability of their technology, or how to convert it into a business which provides something to consumers, people who need to consume the end product. So we need to be thinking about so the companies rather need to be thinking about scalable production. They need to be thinking about processing and how to get that product into multiple formats, in multiple packages. And they need to be thinking about distribution. You can tell I made these slides, they suck, right? But you know, at the end of the day, a business requires these components. It requires the technology, the IP, the core ingredient, the core thing. It needs the ability to take that and manufacture it consistently at scale. It needs the ability to process that into the different formats required for the different kind of end use cases. and distribution channels, and it needs that distribution. And any company that's just focused on the technology isn't yet truly a company. It's relying upon funding to keep themselves alive and to keep money on the table, to keep food on the table for the company. If that funding dries up, then the business is done. So, you know, as a company in the cell-based space, you need to be focused on the technology, but you also need to have a team of people focused on fundraising, and you also need to have a team of people focused on thinking through, working through from a partnering perspective, how to get that initial technology into something that is at commercial scale. Every single cell-based company I've spoken to, with a few exceptions, have never really thought beyond, isn't this technology cool? And I'm really happy I can prove that we can do this. A business is more than proof that you can do something. It's the ability to do that something at a commercial scale and deliver it to consumers in a way that allows them to consume. Obviously, you know, notwithstanding the regulatory environment that we're in the US that would stop us from selling this product, but we need to work, you know, I'm not saying it's easy. There's a lot of things we need to be working on. So how do we build our industry? And that's the question for today and for us all as we move forward. We are at the beginning of a new industry. How do we build it? And I'm outlining some required inputs here. One is the entrepreneurs. That's you guys. GFI identified around, I think last time I looked, around 100, 110 cell-based companies globally working on different aspects, whether it's the initial product or whether it's the, you know, the scaffold, the inputs, the growth factors, and so on. There's about 100 plus companies, give or take, globally. Some of them have raised a significant amount of money, and they still haven't commercialized. Memphis Meat being a good example of that. So we need the entrepreneurs, but we also need the corporates. And this is something Ahmed and I have spoken about at length. The corporates are the folks that are pretty, and I'll tell it to them face to face, are generally pretty bad at the innovation themselves. They used to be good at it. They started off good at it 100 years ago when they started their companies, but they've become quite bad at it. It's something that typically takes them 2 to 3 to 4 years to develop even a non-cell-based product. Just a regular, everyday, somewhat boring product takes a corporate 2 or 3 years to build. But what they are very, very good at is scale production, and distribution, getting the product into all sorts of different places around the world. Coca-Cola is selling its Coke in the desert today. You know, they have the ability to get their product into multiple places. So corporates are necessary and useful in terms of production and scale. Funding. Funding is absolutely a key requirement, as well as the technology, as well as the corporate's ability to produce and distribute that product. That funding is available through corporates. It's also available through VCs and accelerators like us and like Brink and AgFunder and others. Yes, I would argue, you know, we're the best, and I'm saying that because I know that there's a Brink person on the line. But just to kind of cause controversy. But, you know, we don't try and be the second best. We try to be the best at BIV. But ultimately, it's about entrepreneurs, corporates, funding, and it's about the government in terms of regulatory environment. Even the infrastructure required to scale the production probably is going to come from either the government or the corporates, unless you guys manage to raise $100 million like Memphis has. And I think those days aren't gone, but they're going to be the exception rather than the rule. And lastly, the input is the consumer, because if we can't bring the consumer with us as we build this industry, thank you, Ahmed. If we can't bring the consumers with us as we build this industry, then what are we doing it for? We'll be able to produce something at scale, get it to market, and then no one will buy it. Well, great, there's no industry in that. We need to get each of these components in place. Now, as an entrepreneur building a cell-based industry, should you worry about all of these things? Shouldn't you just leave that to somebody else and they'll just magically appear? I would argue, unfortunately, that yes, you do need to think about these things. Now, what I would suggest is this is your current focus if you're building a cell-based industry. You're focused on the technology. That's it. And that isn't a business, and that isn't an industry. Let me give you an example of how I think, and at Big Idea Ventures, we think about our role. We are very strong proponents of building the ecosystem, of working with different partners at different parts of the value chain so that we can help and support our companies. We invest in the best plant-based, cell-based meat, seafood, and dairy companies, and then we bring them together with partners in our either fund or our network to help them in that process. For example, Temasek is in our fund. Temasek is the VC arm of the Singaporean government. As you know, Singapore recently basically deregulated cell-based meat and made it generally recognized as safe. Temasek is an investor in our fund. They're the government. They talk to us on a regular basis, as well as Enterprise Singapore, as well as Economic Development Board Singapore, on what does the infrastructure need to be, what does the regulatory environment need to be for cell-based industries in Singapore. They are incredibly proactive, incredibly engaged, and they're helping not only to make sure the regulatory environment is correct and helpful to build the industry in Singapore, but ultimately that the funds are available and the infrastructure is in place to be able to scale the industry. So these things need to happen with the government. And you as a cell-based company need to be engaging in those discussions, whether it's with Temasek, whether it's with the USDA and the FDA in the US and so on. There are groups of people from a cell-based perspective who have come together to work with the US government and other governments to deregulate and make the recognition of the infrastructure. So governments are critical. Beulah's an investor in our fund. They are a global manufacturer of food processing equipment for the food industry. So that suggests a technology partnership. You guys as cell-based food companies over time will need to partner with companies that have the food technology processing equipment to take your ingredient and to make it generally available in multiple formats. So you need to be engaging with companies like Beulah sooner rather than later. Jividan is a taste and a fragrance company. They are for the food industry. A lot of the food that we eat, I think it's something like 8 out of 10 foods that we eat include flavors that companies like Jividan, if not Jividan, have developed. So they can enhance the taste of what you guys are creating. They don't necessarily need to enhance the taste, that's up to you guys, but they can. So working with companies who are on the taste side is potentially a discussion worth having. Tyson is the second largest animal protein company in the world, and they understand the consumer very well from a animal protein perspective, but also distribution. So supply chain distribution is going to be necessary if your product is ever going to get to someone and get to a table. So you need to be thinking about these different types of partners that you should be engaging with: government, technology, manufacturing partners, taste ingredient partners, distribution partners. All are critical. I'm rushing because Ahmed is going to tell me in a few minutes I've got 5 minutes. All of the components are required: government, consumers, the start point from a technology perspective, etc., etc. So a couple of things. Entrepreneurs are going to be working on solving one of the biggest challenges we have in the industry, which is growth factors. So you guys are going to be critical for that. And then we need to figure out how to scale that technology to allow us to produce in large enough quantities to impact the planet. Production, we need to partner with folks who are going to be producing the right technology for us so that we can manufacture at scale, whether that's 5,000, 10,000 litre, 20,000 litre. We need to be thinking about the technologies that will allow us to scale our technology from point solutions to an industry-wide industry volume. We need to work on, and we need to work together on solving the regulatory challenges. There's going to be a lot of politics in the US. There's going to be a lot of senators who are basically believing that their farmers and their ranchers are going to be able to vote them in and vote them out, and therefore the traditional animal protein industry is going to strangle the regulatory, the political environment, and push them against regulations. Some people don't agree with this. Some people think that the US government is going to deregulate quite quickly. I think there's going to be a little bit more politics than we imagine in terms of when that happens and how that happens. You also need funding. You need funding with the right partners. Again, that's accelerators working with you, that's VCs working with you and thinking in the long term, because cell-based technology in terms of building an industry is in the long term. Now, thankfully, it's a $1.5 trillion industry that we're potentially changing. So there is an opportunity there, and it's a significant market, but you need to scale with the right partners. And that includes the corporates. The corporates can invest. We've seen that with Cargill, with ADM, I think DHM, and other large food companies as well. So scaling with the right partners is important. So just to summarize, unfortunately for the founders, yes, you can focus on the technology, absolutely recommended, but you also need to be focusing on, and this is just kind of a last second summary before Ahmed shouts me off, you also need to be thinking about the funding, because without funding, the technology, your ability to pay salaries eventually goes away. You need to be thinking about scale. And I would suggest, rather than each of you guys working again as point solutions, thinking about how do I scale my business, you come together and think about how do we scale our business? Because ultimately, whether it's Cargill, whether it's Bueller, whether it's Tyson, all of these companies, ultimately there are going to be companies that do a great job with this and support cell-based and really think through how to build an industry together. And there will be other partners who work very slowly and just can't get out of their own way. So what I suggest as a team, as a group, as the start point of a whole new industry, and I really do believe this is a whole new industry, we need to come together and work through how do we scale our businesses. And last but not least, government. You need to be focused as a group on making sure governments in whichever part of the world you're in recognize that cell-based is the solution to their food insecurity issues, to the fact that COVID is not the end of what shocks we're going to have to the system over the next decade. It could unfortunately be the beginning, which means that the food supply chain that was shaken for at least 4 to 6 weeks could occur again. And the best way a government can assure that their people will have food to eat, despite their particular arable challenges, is by investing and building and growing the whole new industry alongside you guys as the founders, and producing protein for the next decade and more. So again, just to summarize, 4 things required: technology, funding, scale, and government. And you as cell-based company founders unfortunately need to be thinking about all 4 of these and coming together as a group, so that you're no longer a point solution, but a solution to building this whole new industry. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. If you need to reach out to me or us, this is the best way of doing so. Did I go over, Ahmed, or do I have like 60 seconds left?
That's exactly time. You can have a few more seconds.
Well, I just want to thank you for putting this on. I always love your conferences, and thanks for making me think about this in a different way, because I could have just come here and just talked about how excited I am about the cell-based industry and how important it is. But I realized on Sunday, as I started to kind of put my ideas together, that it's beyond important. It's the most important thing that we have to deal with and to provide as a people. So I hope I can support the entrepreneurs out there to deliver their vision to a population that needs it and will need it increasingly.